All right, moving on to cultivator. Expanding on what works by measuring, refining, building, and growing proven solutions to make them more effective, efficient, and widely available. Would someone like to speak to their relationship with someone who is comfortable in the cultivator space? Not I might have something I might add up. I might add in there.
Well, let's bounce off each other a bit, Mike,
Sure.
because the that tension or the trade-off is between curator and cultivator,
Hmm.
and because both of them are sort of liquid nature archetypes. So Scout and Pioneer are both gaseous, and
Yeah.
Steward and Regulator are both solid. But there's a lot more, like movement and interplay in between curator and cultivator than the
Hmm.
others.
Yeah.
Because um, so cultivator, there's like this, joyful, expansive, like a sort of a weaving, like a finding synergies and teamwork, and oh, we can do this better this way and make it richer and make it more beautiful and do more kind of a feel about it. So you think popularity, think like a really happily bubbling brook or something along those lines. That's the kind of feel that it has to it. And some of the people that I've worked with who prefer cultivator can be just amazing at, even if it's something as to me dry,
Hmm.
like looking at charts and stuff like that, they can see a story in it and and build upon it, or know what it is that they need, that needs tweaking to just make it a bit better.
Hmm.
Or if you think about marketing that's done really well, the kind of thing that sort of feels really attractive,
Hmm.
that kind of a sense of what it's doing. So that it can be very busy. It's there's lots going on, high activity, and
Hmm. Yeah.
so love to know
Yeah.
your.
Yes, absolutely. And this was really just recently where I mean I've had a lot of experiences with people in the coaching industry where a lot of coaching is about marketing and is about expansiveness and all of this. And a lot of my experience in coaching has started to get deeper into mental health, talking about helping people process deep feelings, and even doing work in the mental health field around suicidality, and that there is a lot of tension between people that I've worked with in the past in the coaching industry and my trying to bring attention to trauma informed practices, or something where there needs to be as a curator, needs to be more attention to why is this not working with somebody who is struggling with mental illness or who is struggling, in our society, as curators and scouts, and feeling invisible. So I've been feeling a lot of tension, especially within in that coaching industry, which is very hyper focused on marketing and expanding, and I'm trying to call attention to the well-being of the person, and in my spiritual communities as well, bringing attention back to, are we practicing spiritual bypassing, like are we ignoring some very hidden dark things and pretending that they're not there at to our detriment. So that's something where there's tension, because again they want to, it's all about love and light and being expansive. But I have a predisposition for the shadow work, for going into the dark recesses of what's really happening, and pulling out the gold, from those places. But there's a lot of tension in inviting people to come explore that. So that's been my experiences with cultivators, and I hope, as viewers are watching this conversation, my intention is, I'm not trying to push those people away. I want to invite them in to a conversation where, where we can find common ground. All right. And then finally, the regulator. Standardizing, commodifying, streamlining, automating, and rolling out known patterns on a mass scale, distributing broadly and creating security and stability. Would someone like to speak to their relationship with someone who is very comfortable in the regulator role?
I'll go there.
Go for it, Trey.
Ellie's smiling because she knows what I'm going to talk about. I have had the distinct pleasure of having a woman beside me along on my journey who started out as a client and then became a friend and then became a colleague. And she prefers the activities of regulator, and I prefer the activities of scout. And to tell you that it caused friction was an understatement. But much like what each of you have been talking about and what Melanie was talking about earlier, that thread between the two, if it's too tight, it's going to snap. If it's too loose, it's out of key. But when it's just right, it sings. It's like a string of a tuned instrument. And where I was playing around in the unknown, she was nailing it down and grounding it. Where I was exploring and dumpster diving and pulling out the risks, she was codifying it. And it wasn't just that, like, because much of that codification is a little more cultivator than it is regulator. But what regulator does is regulator standardizes it, makes it replicable for others, makes it make sense. And there were so many times where we used to say that she was the string and I was the kite. She would land it and I would scope it out and throw it down the thread at her, and then she would bring it down to ground. And that was the dynamic. And we were both completely happy with it because she didn't want to play where I was playing, and I for sure didn't want to play where she was playing. And we did that for 20 years. And I will tell you, our lives have gone in different directions now. But when we get together, we'll get together for lunch, and lunch will turn into dinner. And the server will change over shifts. And we will go for 4 or 5 hours. And it is, to me, it demonstrates the power of how people who can be very, very opposite and very, very different in what they prefer can truly, truly create a match made in heaven. I'm complete.
Trey.
Mike, if I may, there's one thing I'd love to bring in about regulator because of what this week is about. I said the law of rhythm. So regulator, right? It might sound like it's just, everything at Chronos time, but it doesn't. This is a Kairotic cycle. So regulator, think of your heart and what it does. It's like there's a range. You don't want to go above this, like a number of beats per minute. And you don't want to go below this number of beats per minute. But there's this responsiveness according to what's needed, and a reliable responsiveness that's not this sort of perfect metronome. It's something that's there and supporting, like in this substrates form, which I'll leave it to you from there. But regulator sets up the substrates.
Absolutely. What comes up for me as well too, and this is a topic for a future conversation as well, is the management of the time bank and reassigning the value of time. I see as very much a regulator, a comfort zone for the regulator. So yeah, so that's what comes up for me, to measure the Chronos time while we're in the Kairos time, while we're in the Kairotic flow. So thank you for pointing that out. So since we are kind of now transitioning into that conversation about substrates, and I will pull up a slide where where the language of structure is still used, but we'll speak to that in a moment. And this is where we're looking at the differences between the market, the state, and the commons. And I'm going to ask you, Kylie, because there's a beautiful analogy that that we've been using to help others understand the difference about water distribution. And I'd like to invite you, to retell that that analogy.
Okay, so when I'm using this water analogy, mostly it's about the kind of approach to resourcing that helps each of those activities, because the archetypes are primarily phases of activity that are needed to keep life living, I suppose. So each one kind of passes off to the next in terms of the outputs of one of the inputs for the next, and so on. So each one needs its own conditions to be able to do what it has to do. So I use three different types of approach to distributing the resources that are needed, right? One of those is water pipes, right? Now, if you think about what water pipes do for us, they're reliable. You turn on the tap, water comes out. Turn off the tap, water stops, right? So for that's providing like reliable access to somewhere that that it needs to go, right? So that's the appropriate kind of structure for regulator and for steward.
Right, what we identify as the state.
Yeah. Well, we can call it state. It doesn't have to be government. That's probably worth noting, but it's definitely like an infrastructure substrate kind of thing. So yeah, state is an easy name. And then I'll go back to market. So for pioneer and cultivator, they both really need to have some controls over it. So you need to be able to select, what is it that you're going to experiment with? What is it that you're going to optimize? And that seems to be well represented by a watering can, right? So I'll water this plant and this plant and this plant, but that's it. And when you run out of water, you run out of water, right? So it's not just all over the place. It's quite carefully controlled, but it's also fairly agile. So you don't have to have, like this full infrastructure set up of pipes and so on. But then there's curator and scout, right? Now this is stepping into the unknown. You don't know where you're going to need the water, and you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So the appropriate resourcing model for these two is relatively equalized, like rain, right? So rain doesn't prejudge, it doesn't try to guess, it just comes down, goes where it needs to go, life makes of it what it can. So those are the three.
Right, thank you. So I am going to start with your description of what is there. We'll start with the market, and this is what I have on the slide that you had presented some time ago. So the market is described as privatized and converging. The reward should be based on assumed risk and contract negotiation at both personal and organizational levels. Feedback from vote with your wallet sales figures, and is constrained by state rules and resource availability. As I read that, and in our conversation over Telegram, you had mentioned something, Kylie, about it being mostly competitive. And that's one of the things that I'm calling attention to, is how to make competitive environments more collaborative. What comes up for me around this conversation around the state being privatized and competitive, when I think of privatization, I think of keeping secrets to maintain a competitive advantage. And that really, to me, opens up a conversation about cultural tribalism. You know, if you're working for an organization or if you're a part of a country, that sort of arises into nationalism, and there's that competitiveness that escalates into conflict. So that's what comes up for me around looking at the nature of privatization and competitiveness. I'd like to hear from the rest of us. What comes up for you when looking at or considering the kind of environment that is being described here in the market?
Opportunity for a clarifying question, Michael?
Please. Yeah.
Are you speaking to personal experience of the environment, or are you speaking to observations?
A little bit of both. Definitely both.
I'm going to just perk on that for a little bit before I answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What comes up for me, and thanks for that question, Trey, is that the observations, going back to, again, just my observation over time of the degradation of human well-being, environmental well-being, our inextricable link to nature, and what we've done to the world through our competitive, extractive model, is the absurdity of the whole thing. I mean, it just defies logic, and yet here we are actively shooting ourselves in both feet as we're trying to walk. And it comes back, of course, there's many interpretations of where the roots of this, but it goes back a long way. Contrast is so incredibly powerful in the world, and being able to not loathe or vilify the situation, even as we're going down on the Titanic, but to be able to appreciate the contrast, and perhaps never before in human history have the tools available that we have to bring a change about that could be so stunningly rapid that I don't think we really understand that. To me, as I consider market and the model that we're working with, an economic modeling that just, and every day I understand it a little bit more, but my perennial question has been, what is truly a generative economics? I used to call it regenerative, but we don't really have the because we ain't been to the generative part yet to recapture it. We are starting as a known species to be able to actually get generative. And when we deeply recognize first principles that our destiny is bound up with each other, and we start to codify that into a market situation where my efforts and dedication to thriving in innovative and creative ways that we all agree are necessary, and the diversity that can occur with everybody having their own niche within a system that is honoring that, can create a marketplace of such stunning abundance and possibility. And finally, a return to ease and the serious flaming death of compound interest, which I'm realizing more than ever is at the root of so much evil. Oh my gosh. And one-way extraction for the benefit of a few people. But to actually open it up into mutual dependency and agreements for common thriving, not just of ourselves, but of the commons. So that rather than extracting, we're providing a healthy loop back into the well-being for all through the efforts of all. That's the kind of market that I see possible, and that I see being supported with very clear requests for information and governance through an artificial intelligence that silicon-based wisdom, parsing words, but silicon-based intelligence partnered with carbon intelligence, which is what we are in all of our messy glory, is unprecedented. I mean, there's ways to do this thing and to make it come about rapidly and efficiently and healthfully and excitingly, and to start with the very few who really get it and then ignite something where everybody's going to look and say, well, why would I do it this old way, which doesn't need to be killed. It's going to decline of its own weight, and look to the new thing and go, what? I want to do that. Like, that looks fun and healthy and great. And my kids are going to like it. And I'm going to do that. So that's what I see possible in terms of market and state, which will come as a natural evolution out of what I think creativity being captured in a market environment can source, can create, can inspire, can move. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you, Melanie. You are beautifully setting up our next couple conversations as well, in just that piece alone. So with that, since we're kind of segueing into the state, and we have about 15 more minutes left, and I'll try to honor the time as best as I can. Let's go into the state description. Centralized and consolidating. The reward should be based on formalized responsibilities. Feedback from formal systems, e.g. voting, court decision, and constrained by social contract, now corrupted by money. So as I read that, I will ask anyone to just reflect or speak to what feelings come up around that description of the state, which is where the regulators and the stewards are most at home.
So I just want to quickly bring in again that idea of the water pipes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So what we need to be able to do, I think, whenever we're looking at something like the state, we talk a lot about trusting the government or not trusting the government, right? We know how important this is. Like, we don't really expect to be able to trust a corporation. Right? We don't expect them to have our best interests at heart. We do expect that of, a government that's supposed to represent us. We talk about things like no taxation without representation and that sort of thing. So in part, that's what that means to me. A lot of it is about at least trying to make it so that relying on it is not a dumb thing to do, and trusting it is not a dumb thing to do. So, clear expectations and things working the way that they're supposed to, turn the tap on, turn the tap off kind of idea. And maybe just the one thing on that last part is, like, it's so easy to corrupt it with money, or as soon as you allow there to be profit taken out of those things, it undermines everything that you're trying to do in terms of setting up trust, in terms of making it reliable, in terms of making sure that everyone has access, and so on. So that's me.
Just want to make an observation, if I may, how much we have equated the term state with politics. The two are not the same. What I'm excited about when it comes to regulator, specifically the archetype of regulator, is this beautiful movement that's coming out of England called Human Learning Systems. And what it's doing is it's highlighting that it doesn't matter where the decisions are taking place or what the decisions are for. It's fundamentally humans with different values trying to find what works and trying to make decisions. And if we can lean into what it means to truly explore, what it means to truly learn, and what it means to truly respond, then the system isn't preoccupied with keeping the system alive. The system becomes a means rather than an ends, and becomes a way of responding to meet needs, which is originally how public service started. And there's this wonderful movement inside of public service now that is acknowledging that instead of checking off boxes or jumping hoops, we can now learn how to listen, to give attention to who is in the room, and to ably respond to what's happening and what's needed in the moment. And with my preference for Scout, to me, that feels so juicy. And I think that evolution, and it's no wonder that it's coming out of England. I mean, look at England is probably one of, outside of the Romans and the, the older civilizations, in terms of what we have today in our modern day times, England is one of the oldest governance systems that we've dealt with in forever. So it's no wonder that it's decomposing. It's no wonder that it's recalibrating. And I'm excited by this leading edge research and the viability that it gives to stewardship to inform a new stewardship for the world going forward. So, you asked earlier about market, and I don't want to take up too much time and go backwards, but market is just the well-fed child, right? That's all. Market is grown big and strong and is flexing its muscles, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means it's the one that's been fed. So I think the more that we start leaning into this idea of learning and learning together and learning to our strengths and leaning into that cycle, the better off the whole cycle is going to be. So with that, I'm complete.
That's right. I'm going to read the commons. So they're decentralized and diverging. Reward should be based on integrous participation. Feedback is continuous from peers. Constrained by resource availability and other natural influences and social norms. Now suffering from extraction. So go back to my screen here. So I'd like to hear just a response and just a reflection on the state of the commons.
Yeah, so we've talked about the oversized influence of capitalism. Like all of us in our own way, I think have kind of pointed to that, or the oversize of the market. And Melanie was talking about extraction, and where the extraction is coming from is from the commons. It's like basically catching all the rain and taking it over to to play with in market. And sort of as mentioned before, commons is needing that non-judging, availability of rain, so that you're not trying to pre-guess what's going to work and what's not with the goals. So yeah, the commons is in a drought at the moment. It's very hard to get funding for that kind of work. Because it's not seen in general. It's not seen. We were talking about Scout not being seen before. Curators often not really seen either. It gets very confused with Cultivator, for example. yeah, not seen, not considered to be productive. And yeah, just our general relationship, I suppose. It's like common sort of structure is as close, almost as close to the state of nature as you could have before humans come in and start organizing things. Yeah. Turning them into hierarchies or deciding to put things together and make stuff and then trade them in markets. It's yeah. I'll pass over to someone else.
Thank you, Kylie.
You know, I think about what seems like an interesting little sidebar here is that the understanding was about 10,000 plus years ago, when tribes were trading, they weren't trading for need. They were trading to showcase their mastery and their abundance. And that an indigenous root of potlatch is to actually give away, because there's so much abundance in your world. You've come into right relation in such a way that you don't have need. And just thinking about that, it's like, really? Like, that's how we used to do it? It's probably the only example I can think of where that actually existed. And I think we're closer to coming back to that now because there's a fire lit under our tail end. Because if we don't get it together, we're not going to make it. But I really think we are, because we're having conversations like this. And it's happening in an accelerated fashion. And you don't need everyone to do it. You just need those to do it who are looking to do it, to find each other. So we get the ship turned around in a direction. And like I really believe people are going to look at it and go, I don't want to be on that ship. This one's going down and the water's cold. And it's time to move on to a new ship. So imagine a market and state where there's structure to be able to showcase your abundance and your passion and your skill. And we're raising our children that way, and we're having our marketplaces that way, and we're living lives that way. Like, that's what's possible. And that's why I find myself, you know, at the core of it, designing for that kind of thriving. Is why I'm doing the ministerial training. It's why I'm in relationship with you all, why I live the life that I do. So I can come back to that when it all looks like it's going to hell in a handbasket. Because really, that's the truth of what the possibility is. And there's something about this universe. The more I think about that and look and want it, see it, it shows up. So it's pretty amazing.
Thank you, Melanie. And with that, I'm going to start to wrap this conversation up, and I think we'll keep the recording on for our checkout. But no, this is setting us up perfectly for the next conversation that is scheduled for Monday, which I'll be recording with Randy, and that is the law of relativity. And we're going to be looking at, as we transfer now over from October, which is about having these conversations. And I'd like to kind of mark here that understanding the cycle, understanding the Kairotic flow, understanding the archetypal phases will help to bring in more conscious conversations where it's more about collaboration. Now, when we go into October here, we're going to start to look at the numbers, you know, really look at the numbers about how changing the nature of the relationship from competitive to collaborative makes universal basic income possible. Because with time banking, the element of time banking, we're going to start to take a look at, you know, the amount of global debt, the amount of global GDP, and the amount of time each of us has to spend in the commons or in the market or in the state. And then in December, I'm going to start to map out potential implementation on how to roll out this. I guess you might call it a divergent type of system, but that's something I'd like to open the conversation up in December and invite all of you back again. And when we look at the perpetual transmutation of energy, relook at Kairotic flow again, and look at it through the lens of that universal principle. So the only thing I'm going to mention here before we go to a checkout is that I will, when I put this up on the Road Counselor blog, I'm going to put a link on for Kylie's recording about substrates. So yeah, so please, please, if this is appealing to you, go to Kylie's site, go check out all of her offerings, and Trey and Melanie and I as well. Please reach out to any of us if you want to deepen this conversation. So that's always an open invitation. So we'll go to a checkout before I stop the recording, and just want to ask everybody, what did you appreciate most about our time together today?
I think for me, it's about context. I really appreciate inviting this conversation, because bringing it into a context for natural law, for time banking, it really helps to sort of see how everything's kind of connected to everything else when you start to look at integrative generative systems. And I really appreciated that. And I thought it was a great conversation.
Thank you, Melanie.
And I'll pass it to Kylie, because I always pass it to Kylie.
I feel so special. I really appreciated the structure that you put with this, Michael. It was really nice going through each of the archetypes and reflecting on them in that way. It was, Melody, I don't know if I've heard you talk about, like your experience as someone who prefers Steward quite so clearly before. And Mike, you're doing that with Curator as well. Trey and I have talked so much that probably not really a surprises there, but I always love the way that you present it. You make me look so shiny, of course, Actually, it's not me, it's Kairotic flow. But yeah, it was really lovely to reflect through with those, and to get the insights into the tensions as well. So thank you. No, Pastor Trey.
I appreciate how we can be in appreciation forever and it still works. We don't have to catapult into possibility. We don't have to catapult into commitment or task orientation. Not to say that task orientation is wrong. I 100% value task orientation and people who know how to do it far better than me. But for me, it just always feels like coming home. And Michael, just a note that you have brought such encouragement to my life. And I cherish when I get the opportunity to champion you as much as you have championed me. So thank you for the invitation. And thank you for just simply crafting and weaving the environment so that we could just all be here. And the operative word is be.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. I'll pass to you.
I'm brimming with appreciation. I'm excited now about taking this conversation and showing you all off to, to Circle of Miracles, to the time banking community, and I'm just really, I'm really excited about that. Just the richness that everybody has brought to this interaction. And I'm really appreciative of how just the little nuggets that came out is perfectly setting up future conversations in this series as well. So for that, I'm very appreciative, and it's it's a process of just letting go and surrendering and knowing that we're all in very good hands. And sometimes I forget that, but always, when I'm in collaboration with all of you, it's a very beautiful, loving, nurturing reminder of that. And with that, I am complete.